Good morning. Glad you get our site committee started. We're going to start with roll call, please.
Dr. Bartholomew.
Present.
Mr. Ballard.
Here. Present.
Mr. Claxton.
Here.
Mr. Corley is excused. Dr. Eloy is excused. Dr. Fountain.
Here.
Dr. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Geis.
Here.
Mr. Javia.
Here.
Mr. Jones has a proxy. Mr. Butler.
Here.
Dr. Joseph. Here. Dr. LaFari is excused. Mr. Martin.
Here.
Mr. Powell has a proxy. Dr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Ms. Stilley. Dr. Stokes. Here. Ms. Strong. Mr. Touche. Dr. Boiron.
Here.
Dr. Walker. Here. And Dr. Williams. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I believe we have a few guests I'd like to acknowledge, a few BESI members. Mr. Morris. Good morning. Mr. Abba. Good morning. And Ms. Holloway.
Good morning.
If I missed anybody else. Glad y'all could join us today. Let's start with, I'm going to take our personal privileges I've learned watching a lot of legislation. I know, it's been a fun few months, has it not? Just want to thank y'all. This is my last SAC committee. I know there's a lot that are excited that I'm leaving and we have somebody new coming on. So I want to thank y'all for this past year, the job you've done, everybody from the department to BESI. It's been a busy one, and thank you for your patience with me. Stepping up in July for the SAC committee will be Dr. Ken Orling, Vice President last. And for this meeting, I'd like to ask Dr. Orling to at least come sit at the table so he can get the feel of it since he was removed before. So, Doc, if you don't mind joining us. All right, we have number 2 on the agenda is approval of the minutes, March 21st, 2024.
Motion.
A motion by Mr. Fowler, second by Mr. Boiron, am I correct? All approval? Aye. Ayes have it. We have new business. 3.1, consideration of revision to Bulletin 746, Louisiana Standards for State Certification of School Personnel regarding criminal background checks. Have a motion to receive? So moved. Second. Gray. Second by Mr. Bartholomew. All right.
Hey, yes, sir. I'm going to ask Dr. Joffrion to make this presentation. It is a significant change, and so it's worthy of some time this morning, but you're in good hands with Dr. Joffrion to make the update.
Good morning. I told Mr. Lambert this is like a concert and I'm just the warm-up act. Dr. Brumley, thank you. I do want to introduce you. I know many of you know Ms. Paula Bell, but Ms. Paula Bell now serves as our Director of Credentialing. And I've asked her just to join us at the table in case there are any specific questions that I can't answer. I know that she will certainly be able to do so. It is on. Yeah. So while we're getting that fixed, I'll just begin by sharing with you all that criminal background checks were historically done only for employment purposes. And we at the department were using those for information regarding actual certification. The FBI actually conducted an audit several years ago, and then based on some legislation in 2022 and again in 2023, there were some significant changes that were made, which is causing the revisions necessary to Bulletin 746. So the law came about because, as I said, the FBI audit
If I may, the FBI audit was of the state police and the way in which that they were functioning with background checks and how they couldn't be used for dual purposes.
Correct.
At the system level and at the state level. And so they really wanted that to happen twice. And so that was the whole point of that, just for some clarity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the changes that we are going to share with you, we basically put them in several buckets. We're going to share some information with you about the fact that a clear background check is going to be required for individuals receiving their certification in the state of Louisiana. We're also going to speak about the ORI, which is required for us at the Department of Education to actually request those criminal background checks. We're going to share some information defining when a background check is actually going to be required. We'll share some reporting requirements for educators and LEAs, and we're going to share some reporting requirements for the LDOE regarding sanctions taken on actual credentials. We're also going to share some Bulletin 1907 additions to the requirements for individuals. We'll also share some information regarding several of the chapters, how we've restructured, renamed, and the specifics that you all need to know, specifically regarding criminal convictions for felonies, crimes of violence, crimes against children, sex crimes, which are considered our never-nevers, meaning that if an individual is convicted of one of those, that individual is never eligible for certification in the state of Louisiana. We'll also share some information about individuals who would perhaps submit fraudulent documents, professional license censure. So oftentimes we will have individuals who are working in other professions that have a license. If their license is censured for any reason and then want to be an educator, they would not be eligible for certification. Also, failing to meet the standards of effectiveness based on the observation and evaluations that are conducted in your systems, as well as test irregularities or test security violations. So we have actually renamed Chapter 19 from actions related to the suspension, denial, and revocation of Louisiana certificates to be more reflective of the work that's actually going to take place. And so the new title is Actions and Sanctions to Louisiana Educator Credentials. So for everyone, just around some clarity, we at the department actually do not have the ability to revoke an individual certification. Only Bessie has that authority. We at the department have the ability to suspend an individual's current license. In the event that we issue a suspension, we then communicate with the Bessie office. That information is then placed on Bessie agendas, and that information is brought to Bessie, oftentimes in executive session, just due to the issues that are oftentimes discussed. So in section 1901, we've added some additional language requiring the LDOE to maintain and make available the identity of any person whose credential has been denied, suspended, or revoked. So publicly facing, if an individual's credential is no longer valid for one of these reasons, and you would look them up on the Teach Louisiana system, you would note that an individual's certificate has been suspended or revoked. However, you would not know the reason. Again, those issues are confidential. This is eventually going to be a reliable source that you all will be able to use as you're making hiring decisions. So an individual could come to you, they may have a paper copy of a certificate. It's not safe to make the assumption that that paper copy of that certificate is something that you would want to use to determine that. We will suggest that you all have your human resources supervisors actually look up those individuals, and that will be public facing for you. And again, that website is www.teachlouisiana.net. In section 1903, we're adding some language specifically around the rescission. We've been operating as directed currently by the Attorney General ruling, but we formalized it in policy with a definition. So a rescission are not sanctions and will not be reported to the National Clearinghouse. So we currently work with an organization called NASDAQ, where all of that information regarding any individual's criminal history is available to Ms. Bell and members of her team. So if we receive any out-of-state requests for certification, we will be able to deny your certificate based on that information. So again, someone that you would be considering to be hired from out of state, you should again not simply go by that. You should look to see if they have a credential valid in the state of Louisiana. And if you would have any questions around that or a specific individual, you could always reach out. The most significant change to the policy is the creation of section 1904. And this is based on the new law. So you'll see revised statute 17:8.9, criminal history review for certification, effective January 1, 2025. An applicant for educator certification must have a cleared background check from the state and the Federal Bureau as requested by us at the Department of Education. We also will continue to receive wrapbacks for any persons who currently have a credential. Meaning if an individual who is employed in your system and when you hired them, you required that they get that criminal background check, we will continue to receive those wrapbacks. And if we receive any information regarding any of those convictions, we will notify the individual, and we also will notify the current employing school system. So you would receive any information directly from us on an individual in your system if you require that they receive a criminal background check when you hired them. The one thing that I want to stress to you all is an individual beginning January 1, 2025 will have a cleared background check. However, an individual transferring from system to system, I would suggest that you not take that initial criminal background check and use that as current information, because individuals obviously will be well aware of this. And oftentimes what we have found is when an individual will leave one system, they go to be employed at another. That new system requires the criminal background check. We find issues on that criminal background check, and we found that individuals were not able to be hired and teaching in our classrooms. So we are strongly suggesting that any new individual who comes to your system from another, after that initial certification, you continue to require that background check. In 1907, we are adding some information as well as some clarification on the reporting requirements. LEAs must notify us at the Department of Education when a certified employee is terminated and or resigned in lieu of termination within 10 days when action results from a criminal conviction. We want to ensure that we do not have individuals who are system hopping or state hopping. And so while we may receive some of that information, there could be a lag, but you at the LEA level are obviously going to be aware of it and likely aware of it prior to us being notified. So we are asking that we be notified within 10 days. A certificated individual is also required to report the fact of a conviction to the LDOE. I'm familiar with many of your policies that have been created by forethought, and most of you probably have that they are required by policy to notify you of any convictions, but we are also requiring that those individuals notify us at the LDOE, again, as a protection measure to ensure that we can take the appropriate action regarding an individual's certificate. In section 1909, we've simplified and clarified the criminal history language and causes for censure. Nothing has changed regarding the specific reasons for censure. And again, those reasons are criminal convictions for felonies, submitting fraudulent documents, professional license censure, failing to meet standards of effectiveness, or test irregularities or violations. We also have removed a table in Bulletin 746, which listed all of those specific items out, and simply referred to statute 17:587. And the reason that we've done that is in the event that that is changed due to legislation, rather than having to revise the policy, all of that information will be in the current statute. Okay. So I wanted to share with you sort of what has been happening currently based on common practice, as well as what is going to happen now because of credentialing. So in most instances, traditionally, a potential employee will apply, they'll interview, they'll get selected for a position, and then your HR supervisor will send that individual to get a criminal background check. Once your HR supervisor receives that criminal background check, if it's cleared, they're likely simply hired. If there's any issues, they could potentially be bringing that to you, because there are some things that will show up on a criminal background check that do not prevent an individual from being hired. That standard of what hiring practice is going to be for your system is determined solely by you. But once they get that clear background check, the school system hires the employee, everything moves on. Now what's going to happen is the individual's preparation provider, program provider is going to apply for their initial certificate, meaning their resident certificate in many cases for those who are going through our traditional provider programs, or the practitioner license for those who are in our alternate certification programs. So when they request to have that practitioner license or residence license, the individual will have to go through the full background check. If the individual passes and is cleared by our credentialing division, that will then move to the certification process. Then, after they are certified, the LDOE will be notified that that certificate has been cleared and they're eligible for hire. If you're hiring an individual on a TAT, that temporary authority to teach license, and it's the first time when your HR supervisor is requesting that temporary authority to teach, we will not issue that TAT until the individual has passed that background check. So there you can see sort of the differences about what common practice has been and what new practice is going to be effective January 1, 2025. And just to close out, I wanted to share that the price of certification and the CBC, which is the responsibility of the individual who is applying for the certification, is going to be approximately $85. which is pretty standard. The CPC that most of you are already requiring ranges around $40, and then the certification fee, which typically varies between $25 and $50. And so that concludes our formal presentation, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have. Or we can just move to Mr. Lambert on accountability.
I do have one question. Go ahead, John.
Dr. J, just real quick, I'm concerned about timeline. Because currently right now, I guess background check process takes days. And I don't know if this is gonna add to that timeline. So just concerned, it's just a, hey, have you thought about timelines? Or are we working with state police or whoever's conducting the background check to maybe take, I guess understanding that, okay, this is for school systems, can expedite the process?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've been speaking with the state police, and they are trying to work with the FBI to get our ORI, that's our authority, to do the background checks. They've not spoken about a timeline yet. We're just trying to get that authority, but we will keep that on the forefront in our conversations.
On the positive, once it goes from the credentialing to the certification side, we are processing about 98% of our applications now within 15 business days. We know that this is obviously going to add time because we have to wait for the background check before we issue that credential. And as a former superintendent, Dr. Brumley and I can speak to the fact that we know when those individuals, especially all at the same time, are going, that it does take some time. The one thing that I would just add to that, Dr. V, is typically when it's a cleared background, they do come back much quicker than when there are issues on the background check.
Question, Dr. Jopion. Will the LEAs be responsible for explaining these changes to our Type 1?
We have actually been having lots of rounds of stakeholder engagement. One of the things that we wanted to do was make individuals aware of the changes to policy, but also for individuals to help us to create the procedures that are going to be most effective and efficient for the LEAs. We will continue to present information around this in monthly calls, newsletters, etc. So we will be doing lots of communication around it, as well as some continued stakeholder engagement. Anything that you all can do to help us to get the information spread across is certainly going to be appreciated. And this is going to be presented and on notice of intent. So there will be several months before obviously the policy becomes effective, and the implementation date is January 1, 2025.
So I'm going to comment on, I think getting with us with our HR directors will be the best way to go. I think you worked with my HR director, and that's been wonderful. So
Yeah, we did. We actually invited all of the membership of LaSaspa to join us in a conversation. Ms. Bell presented it to probably about 40 HR supervisors across the state a couple of weeks ago, and they did help us to make a few minor tweaks, and we're going to reach out to them again for process.
Go ahead, Ms. Joseph.
Just for a point of clarity, will there's two background checks? So there'll be a background check for this, that the school system will conduct, and then a background check that the credentialing organization will conduct? Did I hear that correctly?
So when the FBI did the audit of the Louisiana State Police, what they were told was you should not use one individual background check for hiring and for certification. We will have to have the cleared background check before we issue the initial license. So if it's a practitioner, someone coming on a practitioner, it would likely be safe for you to hire that individual because it's the first license that they receive. However, if it's someone that was on a resident license and they're on that residence license for a year, student teaching prior to coming into your system, we would still strongly advise that you all conduct an additional background check, and want to be really clear that if someone is moving from Orleans to Jefferson, we would suggest that you go ahead and have that new individual go ahead and do that background check. It's protection for you, it's protection for your system, and protection, most importantly, for our students.
Got it. So it is, yes, so there will be 2 background checks.
Yes, ma'am. I would suggest that you do that.
So 2 things of clarification. Is that going to be a cost to the applicant again? Because we charge them for the initial background check. They have to pay to get the certification run. Is that going to go up, or is it going to stay the same? Or
The current price for background checks is $40, and that cost is usually the responsibility of the individual. I do know that some systems actually, after a certain number of months that they're hired in the system, they do reimburse the individuals. So, I mean, that's obviously an option, but it is not a cost to the LEA unless you want to incur that cost.
so the applicant's going to have to pay an additional amount to what they normally do for their certification right now?
Yes. So when the individual gets their initial certification, in addition to the certification fee, they will also have to pay for the criminal background check fee, and that averages around $85.
And my second, just to clarify, I know when this bill was in the process, to get when you apply for a new certification, or to upgrade or to change that's when you go through another background check. Everybody that's working now, and I thought when this bill or this legislation was originally, every 5 years, everybody had to get, is that true? I mean, I didn't read it that way.
And we're working with our legal counsel to determine the age of a CBC and when we need to run another one. What we're looking at right now is for certification, we would require 1 background check. Now, bear in mind, we've been receiving these through the employment reason. We still have that data, we still have that information. And they have authorized, the FBI has authorized to continue to maintain that information. So if we already have a background check on file for them, we're not going to send them for another one unless we're looking at about 5 years old. Now, bear in mind that too, that a background check is only as good as the day it's run. You know, they could go out and a crime is committed the next day, but yeah.
The only time they're going to have another one is if they're changing their certificate, changing jobs, going somewhere else, trying to improve, like going to apply for a superintendent or a principal in another system. We're not going to take all of our teachers every 5 years and make them. I just want that clarification.
We should receive the wrap backs.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Claxton, just.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
We're fortunate that we do ours in-house, so we get them back pretty quickly. But the second one, who would conduct that and where would they go?
So for us, the individual is actually going to apply to us to request the criminal background check, and we're working on the procedural pieces. You know, first it was policy, now we're going to work on all of the specific details, but the individuals are going to request of us, typically through the preparation programs, unless it's a temporary authority to teach where they're coming directly to you to request that. And then we will give them some sort of code. The code is going to be used to go ahead and get it to ensure that we receive the criminal background check so that we can process the application.
We don't know where they will go do it?
It's going to vary. I mean, we're likely going to still be able to use the Louisiana State Police, the current locations. They're also working on creating some...
So if I'm tied in with the state police like we are, I think Frank said he was, there's a chance we could do that in-house as well?
We're exploring all of those options.
Yeah, we have the ability to do, we have 5 machines, we do our own criminal background checks in-house. But we also, to help out our employees, we pay for their licensures, we pay for all that. We cover those costs, whether it be for teachers, parents, subs, all of our employees. So I'm just trying to figure out what that burden is going to be on the school district, what we're looking at, that being our price. What would that look like for us?
And let me remind remind everyone, this is not a position any of us wanted to be
No,
in.
it's not.
What happened is the FBI came in with the state police and they said, you know, for decades in Louisiana, what would happen is school systems would send to the department a background check, as well as the application for a license. Because law says that in order to be certified, you have to have the background check. And so you all were using it for employment purposes, and then the state was using it, the background check that you sent, for certification purposes. The FBI came in with the state police and says you can't do that anymore. You can make your own determinations on why they don't want that to happen anymore, and I have my own thoughts. But they want that to be separate. And so the initial conversation with the legislature was, well, potentially move background checks from certification and just place background checks on the employing agency. You're the ones that need to know if the, if the person is clear to work in your system. That didn't gain much traction, and somehow it got flipped around, and basically the department is now going to function as the background check agency. So I don't think you'll have multiple background checks forever. It's just a period in the interim, because moving forward, the one-stop shop for both license and the background check will be the department. We're really excited about this, to do this work, but I think that the issues are legitimate around timing. Some things are out of our control. You know, the way in which the state police turns things around is out of our control. We're working with them to encourage them to understand the importance. But Dr. Jofion can tell you, this is a conversation that I've had many times of, we have to be urgent. If we get to August and there's I know it's not this August, but next August, if a classroom is vacant, the system's going to be waiting on us for the turnaround. You know, and there are things that are going to be beyond our control as we have to wait on the licenses. But basically just think of it like we're going to ultimately be the one-stop shop for both criminal background checks and licensing.
And just credit to our division, who have been working tirelessly. We have gone through a multitude of certifications from all time to ensure that we know that every individual who is credentialed in our state either has or does not have a background. And we're getting close. I think we have, 10 months left, and then we'll actually be caught up and know from all time who's got them or not. And then procedurally, we will determine how we're going to go about getting the CBCs on those individuals. You know, the one thing that we do not want to do is en masse say that everybody in a certain parish has to go do that. So we're procedurally making those determinations now. And so beginning January 1, 2025, newly certified or anyone requesting a renewal and or an advancement will have to have those clear backgrounds. Who doesn't already have one.
I got a question to Doc over here. Go ahead.
I may be the only one that thinks this way, but I think this is a good thing. I'd rather wait a couple of days rather than have somebody in the classroom with one of the crimes that's listed on those enumerated lists. My only question is, currently, when we order the background check, and state police has changed their process, there's kiosks all over the place now. All you have to do is do the search on the form that we give the employees, and they're all over the place, and they come back pretty quickly. Right now, when we order these background checks, this department gets a copy of it as well.
Yes.
We're going to continue doing background checks upon hire, regardless of all of this other stuff. Will y'all continue to get that? And if not, are we obligated, if we get a criminal background check that shows that something occurred following their certification, certificate being issued, that would cause a revocation of that certificate, are we obligated to report that to you?
Yes, the state law that was put into place will allow the Department of Education, if made aware of a situation, we can send someone in order for them to maintain their license for a criminal background check. So we can make that request as we are made aware. We're made aware through the media, through school systems, through individuals when there's an issue, and then we do an investigation. But we will have that authority under this new law to send that person for a background check. To the point that you asked, will we still receive the ones due in part to you requesting them for employment? The FBI and the state police have assured us that while we are transitioning into this new procedural process with our new state law, that they would continue. They're not going to cut us off. They're going to continue to allow us to receive those until this is fully implemented.
Then you won't.
And then we won't.
Correct.
Mr. Bob, I have a question.
Along those same lines, that bullet point 1907, you talked about reporting requirements, but you said report of criminal charges. Oftentimes, allegations happen, we talk them out, and they're gone. Is it our responsibility, because oftentimes these criminal charges may not be filed or way down the road. I mean, is it our responsibility if they're in our system, they resign? And then when you say our reporting is required by us, oftentimes these things get dragged out year to years. I'm a smaller system, I think I can handle that, but I look at some of our larger systems, people come and go, it's still our responsibility to report anyone who resigns on an allegation.
Allegations, no. Our legal counsel has advised us that convictions are what we have to and are obligated to take action on. Convictions. Now what we do is when we're made aware, sometimes we are made aware when there's an arrest. We will continue to monitor that case, that situation. We have a staff that investigates. And if and when we are made aware of a finality, a disposition of conviction, then we take action. But arrest, no.
Do you have any more questions or comments? I have one last thing, because I know you want to leave and I don't want you to leave. We're going to put you through it too. This is my opinion, everybody else can agree or not. Since you've been on board and your staff, I want to tell you thank you. Because we were so backlogged and now things seem to be flowing a little better. So I do want to thank you, Doc, and your staff for that. So thank you.
The staff is amazing.
Yes, ma'am, sweetie.
Sorry, I have a question. For the statement where it says employer determines suitability for hire, is there a standard in terms of how old something might be on a background check? And I ask because I think all of us have probably had situations where something happened when the person was 18 or 19 years old. They're 45 now and have been clean. Is there a standard for that determination?
No, ma'am, there is not currently anything in policy, and those decisions are left up to you as a superintendent.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to receive. Everybody have a comment? I have a motion on the floor to receive. All in favor? Aye. Nays? Ayes have it. Thank y'all. All right, 3.2, consideration revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding the K through 12 accountability system. I need a motion to receive.
So moved.
Motion, Ms. Williams. Second, Dr. Gray.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Brumley, it's all yours.
It's been good to engage with everyone on this process and the opportunities that we've had. I want to thank the leadership of the organization for giving a lot of time and visiting with our staff and then Bessie leadership. I think we've met probably 4 or 5 times to talk about issues and the plan. And so I thank you all for that. We've held webinars to talk through the issues. And we are at a place today where we feel like we're ready to move forward with a proposal. It's very student-centered, and we look forward to sharing it again with you today. In the first meeting of the new state board, they unanimously passed a motion charging the department to come back with a revised accountability formula for their June meeting for their consideration. So that's what we have worked to do over the last few months, and have appreciated the engagement. So we'll walk through that again today. We'll pay special attention to some of the changes that have developed as a result of board leadership and our staff meeting with various stakeholders, including each of you. So I'm gonna skip through some of this fairly quickly, but for me, when I think about the purposes of having an accountability system, it's about driving academic outcomes for students, incentivizing the things that are most important, and it's about providing the public very transparently with a measure and an indicator and a signal of school quality. And so those are the two real reasons that we felt like were most important to highlight. As we work to develop this particular plan and draft a plan, our team really operated off of three fundamental pillars and drivers, and that was higher expectations for students, for schools, for systems, for the state as a whole, being simple and transparent with the ability to understand and articulate the system. And clearly that's not something that exists today. I think that particularly once you get into some of the modeling of the growth work, I'm not aware of many people across the state that could fully explain the accountability model and the various particulars of the present model. And finally, because the board, alongside Regents, adopted a definition for career and college readiness, which is the first definition of career and college readiness the state has held, it was important to the board for us to use that as we thought about the changes to the system. And so, as we did that, we basically divided the system into three different areas. One is growth. Grow. The second is achieve, or reaching proficiency mastery. And the third is the ability to thrive beyond the high school experience. And so one of the things that we've heard for several years now, and I know it to be true, is that schools who are oftentimes serving some of the most needy communities and needy school populations are doing good work, and they're academically growing those students each year. But because of the present weighting in the formula, they weren't necessarily being recognized for that work. And we understand that that's a problem in terms of school morale. We understand that's a problem in terms of teacher retention. And so that was something that we really wanted to solve for. But I'll tell you, in the current accountability model, I want to say something like 80% of systems get an A or a B in the growth model. And so we needed to make sure, A, that the growth model was one that we felt like was a credible model, and two, we wanted to make sure that we assign the appropriate value to that model. And so that's the first piece of this, and we worked through that a good deal. And so I just wanted to call that out. The second thing that's pretty important is this system, and I know it's been challenged a little bit in terms of the nuance that is lost as you move to something more simple, but it is more simple. It is easier to understand, it's easier to articulate, and I'm not challenging the fact that there are nuances that are lost as a result of the simplicity. I get it, I've heard it, I don't necessarily disagree, but it is something that we wanted to achieve, and so we're moving away from this. If you do this thing, you get 125 points. If you only do this thing, you get 80 points, and it's just simply what percent of your students met that particular indicator. It's just what percentage of the students met that particular indicator. Here is the definition from Bessie and Regents for what it means in the state of Louisiana to be college or career ready. On the university pathway, it means graduating essentially on time without the need for remediation or co-requisite support once the student gets to the university. And on the career side, graduating with the foundational skills for entry pathways into work. And so, we took that step further and said for us, we want it to mean that on the university diploma side, that students have achieved on a nationally recognized exam a mark that indicates college readiness in terms of that. And also, we want to make sure on academic content that students are proficient, that they're mastering that content, and that they have earned some degree of college credit through some outlet while still in high school. Because we know if we can have that exposure early, that they're more likely to go to college, they're more likely to stay beyond the first year. On the career side, we took that to mean making sure that as they come out of high school, they have work-based learning experiences, which is going to be a combination of classroom conversations around soft skills that we hear from business and industry, and also on the job training. And they would then graduate with a high-wage credential, or an apprenticeship, or a certificate from the LCTCS in a particular specified pathway. And so that's what we tried to accomplish there. I will also share that in many conversations that our team has had with particularly our board leadership, there is a strong appreciation of the fact that when only about a third of the students in the state on average are mastering content upon graduation, that we need to bolster that. We need to do better there. And there is a belief, a shared belief, I think certainly within our team and leadership of the board, that mastery, proficiency in core content areas is a very strong measure of career and college readiness. And so that has been something that's further solidified throughout the conversations that we've had with our board leadership. The first piece is the growth piece. Really, it's basically assuring that students at least grow half of a scale score annually. So if you're low on SAT, by the end of the year, you've got to be at high on SAT or stronger. If you're at low basic, you have to be at high basic. If you're at high basic, you have to be at mastery. So just making sure that you move a half of a scale point. Students at that mastery level, achievement level, not skill point. Students at that mastery level have to at least move one skill point, and then students who are advanced, they simply have to remain in that advanced category. So the theory behind that is if you take a student who in the third grade is at the very lowest achievement level, which would be the bottom half of LSAT, by the time they arrive at ninth grade, they are on grade level, they're not needing any additional support, and they're ready for things such as that more rigorous high school content, they're ready for those nationally recognized exams, they're ready for those college and career experiences because they have that proficiency in the content. And so if we apply that, and as we have worked data as the team and we're trying to get our system set up for this, you see that these are the numbers where we presently stand. So we would measure growth on math, English. The bottom 25% achievers in your school would receive additional attention. And so there's a mark in there that would count them twice. And so what I think we'll see here is efforts such as the high dosage tutoring bill that just passed will come into play, where you're identifying these students, you're providing additional support. I think things like other methods to ensure and incentivize that you have the attention that these students need and deserve will be recognized. And then lastly, English language acquisition is specifically called out, and you see our numbers there. Now, one shift I'll go ahead and call out that our board leadership has agreed to make is instead of using 10 as the number, as the base number, minimum number for a score here, that's going to move to 15. So it's going to move up from 10 and to 15. So you may say, well, why not make that 50? Or why not make that 40? Here's the challenge. Whatever number you use, you have to use it for all of the measures. We have some schools in the state that are smaller schools. They may only graduate 25, 30 kids. I know that's hard for some of you to understand if you haven't worked in some of the rural settings, but we do have smaller schools that have low numbers. If you set this number at 50, and you have a high school in the state of Louisiana, a smaller school, and they have a graduating class of 35, they would not even get a graduation index, because then that would become an identifying factor there. So we're having to balance that number against other things like graduation rates as well. And so the board did agree to move that up from 10 to 15. The next piece is achieve, pretty standard there. It's just the mastery rates within your school and your system. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we get to the Thrive piece. The first of the three high school specific measures would be the percent of the cohort earning the diploma. The second piece, and I have a disclaimer on this piece, this is the nationally recognized assessment piece. So one of the changes that has been discussed and agreed to is moving the ACE from a 21 to a 20, which will align with the present TOPS number. But what we will use is we'll use language that will say, that this number aligns to the top opportunity award, but it shall not be lower than this 20. And so this moves from 21 to 20. It's something that I know we heard and the board heard a lot about around aligning to TOPS on this number, and so that's a change. So we made a corresponding change to the equivalency scores of SAT and CLT. And the disclaimer on this slide is really, one, we have a bill, I think it was 742 or 752 by Representative Bamberg, that was passed on the last day of session. And so that particular bill allows for all students, regardless of if they're on the university diploma or the career diploma, to be able to use any of these assessments for their points in this particular indicator. And so if that bill is signed, the students can use any of the, or you can use any of these for the points for the student on any pathway. And also if it stands and it holds, career diploma students would no longer per statute have to take the ACT. They could take the ACT. We would intend to still finance the ACT for those students, but they could also take, say, WorkKeys or ASVAB. That's if the bill holds. If the bill is vetoed, not by the governor, then this particular slide would revert back to the slide we previously shared with you all, that has, it's separated by university students and career students. So if it's vetoed, it would go back to, if you're a university student, you would have to have the 20 on the ACT, the SAT, CLT, and if you're a career student, you could have any of those options, or you could have the WorkKeys Gold. So that's just a disclaimer that, we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen there, but we will respond accordingly to the action taken by the governor on this slide.
Dr. Bromley, I have a couple of questions on this.
Yes.
Number one, the CLT.
Is it okay if I just run through
I just wanted to explain what a CLT is.
It's a classical learning test.
Who takes that test?
Yeah, it's a growing test that you're seeing across the country. It's widely used in Florida. I think around 300 colleges are now using it. And so it has an equivalency to SAT or SAT.
Have anybody in the state that takes it?
I'm not aware. We were just trying to provide a menu of options and not limit the options, but just try to have more options there. And then the Career and College Acceleration Index. Any student can use any accelerator that they choose. So this, where you see University Accelerator, it doesn't necessarily mean that only a career student or university student can do that, or the same thing on the Career Accelerator. Any student in any pathway can use the accelerator of their choice. And so the first one is just about what I explained earlier, the university. Do they have one of those nationally recognized exam scores that shows their readiness? And then two, have they earned in some way credit in high school, college credit in high school? And so a couple of changes here I want to note on the University Accelerator. One is, whereas we have subgroup scores for math and English on the ACT that earn university credit, likewise, there are subgroup scores on the SAT that earn college credit. And so we were in conversations with LSU just yesterday about what those numbers look like. And so we've included that because we want to expand options for students who happen to take the SAT. One thing that's not on this slide that will be added here, and it's part of our conversation, is we're going to add 3 CLEP. So if a student has 3 CLEP scores, at the Board of Regents flagship score, then they too could get credit. And so what that means is whatever LSU uses on a CLEP score to award college credit, if you have a student that gets 3 of those, then they would meet the accelerator period. That's just not on the slide yet. As you can imagine, we've had a lot of moving parts with the action of the legislature this last week. On the career accelerator, really no changes there other than I'll show you, I'm not sure what's happening with those yet. I wanted to show this. So in conversations that you all had, there's been concerns about the ability to scale up the work-based learning, the internships, as quickly as you would like. And so we put in a provision here specifically related to the way in which we would phase in this work-based learning component. So the work-based learning will be phased in over a period of several years for that internship piece, not the credentialing piece, but that internship piece, which is what has been in question. So in the first year, the school will earn 5% bonus, and this piece will eventually go away. It's just for the scale out. So in the first year, the school will earn a 5% bonus for reaching the goal of 25 of career accelerating students completing that work-based learning experience, which is the basic bundle plus the internship or the advanced credential plus the internship. In the following year, the expectation will grow to 30 and so forth until we reach 65% of that expectation. So that's something that we work through with leadership of the board here to try and address the concern of the urgency, but the reality of some of the concerns we were hearing from the group around scaling right off the bat across the board on internships. And then if I go back on the service accelerator, we have a signed military acceptance letter or a service academy acceptance. Call out again on that middle column. The Workforce Commission is going to be the group that curates that list. The department is not going to unilaterally determine what is a basic credential, what's an advanced credential. We will work with the Workforce Commission to make those decisions, and I would urge you as system leaders and as you work with your business leaders, if you have a particular credential that makes a lot of sense in your region and you think it's undervalued, you will have the ability to take that conversation to the Workforce Commission, and they can potentially scale that value up on their list. Next is letter grades. So the way in which this will work is, okay, so in the fall of 24, we will create 3 scales using the cut scores based on the following. So based on the 23-24 data, we will use that data and we will say, okay, in the initial rollout for year 1, 10% of schools will be an A, 20% will be a B, 40% a C, and systems 20% a D, and 10% an F. One change that the board has, leadership has agreed to here, just for your information, is around the concern that you all had around in that first year, advanced academies and select schools might take up a disproportionate amount of weight in the A and B. We're gonna set these scores in the fall of 24, which means when scores come out in 25, those cuts have already been established. So you could have a situation, you will have a situation where you probably would have additional schools beyond 10% that are A or 20 that are B, because we're going to set those cuts based on the 24 data. And that is the way in which we've talked about accommodating for the concern about disproportionate numbers of advanced and select schools taking up that A and that B category. So I wanted to call that out.
Before you flip,
Yes, sir, Tommy.
that one says 24, ours says 26. Can you get a clarification?
It should be 24. Yeah, sorry. Again, this is a look at what the simulations could be in Louisiana for elementary, middle, high, and district. Again, if we're setting on 24, we'll set that whenever those numbers come in. This is just based on older data, but you do see, if I have the Florida and Mississippi, I mean, you see it's very similar to Mississippi and their numbers, as well as Florida's. It's just very similar. Even though the systems aren't the exact same, they're very similar. So that's, So that's the conclusion of that and some of the changes that we've made. I just want to ask Mr. Morris quickly, did I neglect any of the changes that we had previously discussed?
So, okay, speak from here, I guess. Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to highlight at this point that it's not brought out in this deck that I think is extremely significant for all of us, students, teachers, everyone, is that with the new proposal, that any concerns about these incoming ninth graders not being prepared to take the LEAP test. With this proposal, school systems will have an additional 2 years to prepare those students to take those tests. So that struggling student will now have 2 years of opportunity to catch up. We all know there's a lot of catch up in this world we're living in. But with the new program, we'll have an additional 2 years to prepare those students for that Algebra 1 test. An additional 2 years to prepare those students for that English 1 test. So if that's a pre-algebra class, a business math class, if it's additional tutoring or whatever, now we've got an opportunity to prepare those students to take the test. Now they're prepared to take the test, certainly the expectation is that they're going to perform better on the test, which is going to be better for students, it's going to be better for school systems, parents, communities, and everybody. And it's going to align with our model here, which is to prepare students for that next step after high school. So we take a lot of that stress out of that ninth grade test environment, away from teachers, away from school systems, because kids are not prepared to take the test. So for me, this is an extremely valuable item that's being added that I want to make sure everyone's aware of. It's not in the handout. But I think it's extremely valuable and look forward to the opportunities that we have now to help those students, provide them with the supports that they need to prepare them to take the test 2 years later, if that's the appropriate pathway for that student. So thank you, Superintendent Plumlee, for that opportunity.
All right, any questions or comments from the floor? Superintendent?
I'm sorry, I had one more to add if I could. Also, we recognize that with the current system, that there's a built-in 5% escalation for the next 2 years. We can get this proposal passed, we'll put that on pause and ask district leaders to focus their efforts on this new proposal and shifting resources and finances and so forth towards the new assessment system. So that will put it on pause, take some of the stress away from that. People aren't chasing points on an old system. They can be focused on the new system and what we should be shifting resources again and finances to support our kids with the new system. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Brumley, you mentioned that there was some concern about magnet schools or schools with select admission processes taking up a larger share, and you said something that was going to address that, but I couldn't connect the dots on how what you said was going to address that. Can you expand on what you were explaining?
It doesn't solve for the concern you have. It does lessen the concern you have. So instead of when the first SPS and letter grades would roll out, so the first year, so we're in, next year will be 24-25, and so you'll be on the current system. Then for 25-26 would be the first year of this new system, 25-26. So fall of 26 would be the first time when this particular system assigned your scores and your letter grades. So instead of at that point saying, okay, we're going to look and we're going to make 10A, 20B, we're going to go ahead and use data from the 23-24 year and go ahead and set those simulated score numbers. And so it could be, and it probably will be, that once we get to 26, that you would have a greater number of students than 10%, I mean schools than 10% that would be A, and probably greater than 20% that would be a B.
Understood, and I'm trying to, and I know that this is a very fluid topic and a lot has changed, so the last sentence in section C of aggregated indicators in the narrative says, the initial scale shall be set utilizing simulation available from 24, and that the initial percentages of school grades earned are no more than, and then it says 10% A, implying that 10% would be a goal. That if you perform really well, maybe 10% of you get to A. Not that 10% of them shall be, and maybe more than, as you just described it.
So we can look at the language if that needs to be clarified, but the bottom line there is we would set the 10, 20, 40 based on the 23, 24 data, and then you may have a greater percent of schools A or B once the first one rolls out in 26 as a result of that.
As a state.
Yes, right. Yeah. For the elementary, middle, for the high school, and for the district. And another piece is we are just, another change that was made is that we're going to put a trigger in when probably, I think the number is 50%, is that what we put? When 50% of schools reach A and B status, it would automatically prompt the scale to go up 5 points. And so there will be an automatic trigger built in. So
That was actually my second question. Can we go to the slide that shows the cut scores as they relate today for districts and schools?
Yeah.
So, yes, sir, that's the slide. Right.
So
now,
this is based on the 22, 20. This is hypothetical based on 22, 23. We would do this using 23, 24.
yes, sir. The concern is that the difference between an A performing school and a C performing school is very narrow. Looking at these scores, right? They're not even close to the 10% range, which is the landing place eventually. And right now, we have no schools or districts, I'm looking at the district column, that are at the 50% mark, right? So we've got very few. So an A is to get to 50. And we're establishing a goal of 90. I would suspect that we have no districts approaching 80 right now, and we have a goal of 90. But if you increase that percentage by 5, it would have an extraordinarily detrimental effect on everyone's district performance scores, because you're going to take what is now an A and make it a C if 50% ever reach that target. And the public perception would be that schools got tremendously worse, when in reality, schools got better. And so the concern is how we're scaling this out and what that's going to communicate to the public about the condition of our public schools. And then, of course, all of the other things that are associated with schools that are in this DNF status. So how we scale this out matters tremendously. And I think that we have a lot of work left to do to get to a place where districts can endorse the formula based on how we're going to scale this out. And then the last comment, you mentioned that there were...
Before that, can I make one?
Yes, sir.
Because it's related to that. So if you look at district and you see A 49.6 to 100 and B 44.7 to 49.5. So if you take those two together, basically 30% of the systems are in those two buckets.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if 50% ever get to fill those buckets, when you increase that by 5, I believe that the result would be, if you ran the numbers on this, that you would eliminate all A and B schools because the cut line between A's and B's are so tight. It's not a 10% cut line as it exists now. It's the goal, but it's not today. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but the difference between these are very shallow. And that 5%, again, it just feels like an arbitrary number.
Yeah, I understand.
Rather than looking back at, well let's realign and redefine A, but not in what appears to be an arbitrary 5-point number that's disconnected from a distribution of schools that
or school districts that make sense. Do you understand my
Yes, sir.
concern?
Yes, sir.
And then the last question has to do with the acceleration, I don't know what we're calling them.
Acceleration index?
Yes, sir. You said that was only going to be applicable during the scale out, and that at some point it goes away. Can you clarify exactly what that means?
That's for so if you look in the career accelerator, you see it says plus internship and plus internship for the first two bullets. You know, we heard a lot about, we heard a lot of concerns about everyone trying to scale out all students on this career accelerator into an internship right away. You know, we heard that. I mean, I feel like I heard that from everyone. And so what the board worked to do here is they worked to create this. Which gives essentially some grace period to build out. So we didn't want to say if you don't hit something, we're taking away points. So we just built this model that will exist for a period of time so that it helps people as they scale out into those internships. So the work-based learning will be phased in over a period of several years. In the first year, the school will earn a 5% bonus for reaching the goal of 25% of career students accelerating, and meeting that acceleration mark. In the following year, the expectation will grow to 30. So what we're trying to do in working with board leadership is hear the issue about having 100% of students here on the first day, and we're trying to build in some methodology to help appreciate the fact of, or appreciate the lift that will be.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Brumley. Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Dr. Brumley, I'm not sure if you or Mr. Lambert can answer this, but in 1907, which is pairing and sharing of schools with insufficient test data. So what I have in St. Tammany.
I thought you were talking about in the year 1907.
But what I've got.
Conrad, could you come up to the thing?
Exactly. What I've got is, I've got 9 schools in St. Tammany whose buildings are in the 3rd grade. So if I'm reading this correctly, based on that information, 100% of their school performance score will be determined by the scores of the 3rd graders scored advanced and mastery. Is that right? There would be no growth component, no other component, but 3rd grade. Those first time ever LEAP test takers must score advanced or mastery, or every school there or in the early centers below those would receive that would be their only school performance score.
Yeah, you're talking about configuration.
Configuration. So
other than as we roll in the K2 work, then that will come into play because the K2 work will fall into the English section. And so you'll then get the growth on English. You'll get the bottom 25%. You'll get all of that.
That's not part of the plan right now. So I guess that's the concern of my principals, my teachers. That's an extreme amount of pressure to put on one testing group that represents those first 5 grades, basically. The teachers, the administrators, the school system, it's unbearable. I mean, to put all that pressure on that one group for those 9 buildings, but it's more than just 9 buildings, because I have some that are just 2, 3. Mr. Lambert's relatives go to one of those feeders where it's a pre-K, K1, and then it's 2, 3, and then they move on to middle school 4 through 6, where that's not an issue. It's an extreme amount of pressure.
So tell me how that's much different than, what exists today. Just help me.
I don't know that it's much different than it is today. It's just an extreme amount of pressure that we're putting on one group, and their scores transcend multiple buildings down.
But that's the pressure that exists today in the system, because they don't have that growth data for 3rd grade now. I mean, it's just, we haven't.
But it's all advanced mastery. It's all advanced mastery.
Yeah. So the system hasn't dealt with that to help ameliorate that situation, but there's not a difference in terms of the third graders and the growth. But, what will change is once the K2 controls it.
We're gonna see significant score, we're gonna see a significant reduction in what's going on. There'll be no other factor that will play into it other than advanced and mastery. So those buildings are really having a hard time wrapping their brain around it.
Other than this is where the distribution matters, because everyone will be in that same situation to begin.
Doc, you have some?
But I understand what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and I've got a few items, and I want to preface this with, I like the simple and transparent component a lot. And we all can agree that there's some flaws in the current system. However, this might be simple and transparent, but it's far from logical and equitable. The first point that I want to make on behalf of my school district is I've got 1.5%, and we've had this conversation, of my population that is EL, that would account for 8.3% of my accountability score. On that scale that you showed, 64 kids out of 4,165 on my simulated scores drops my district from a B to a C. Even with the number 15 counting for a subgroup, if I only had 15, that percentage would drop to 0.3% of my student population. That would make up 8.333 to infinity percent of the district performance score. That's not equitable and that's not logical. We know it's a flaw, and the argument of making the rules for the whole state based on anomalies of small high schools, that still just doesn't sit well for me. There should be different rules for those schools that may have 15 or 20 or 25 graduates. Part of the language in the policy for this new accountability plan is for kids scoring ready to meet post-secondary goals in accordance with other sections. When it comes to the national recognized assessment, it's a hard sell to get parents when a kid finishes their sophomore year to sign a kid up for a pathway other than a university pathway. My wife is a prime example of that. My youngest child finished high school last year. He just completed his first year at Fletcher Technical Community College. He has never had any desire to go to college, but the parent decided, you're on the university pathway. The best he could ever do on that ACT was a 19, yet he scored mastery in just about every leap he took since third grade. This young man will start working in one of the local chemical plants, who was accepted for an apprenticeship, making 25.63 cents an hour, with the ability to earn at 19 years old $53,000 a year, which is more than the starting teacher pay in just about every district in the state of Louisiana. But he would count as a zero in this new accountability scale for the national assessment because his mother chose to put him on a university pathway. We face that reality in our school districts, that we know that many of our kids should be on the Jump Start pathway, but the parents aspire for their kids to go to college, and they're not going to sign them up for a Jump Start pathway. So whether the governor signs that bill or not, I see no reason why Bessie can't adopt what that bill required. And that would be fair and equitable for most of the kids that sit in our high schools. When it comes to the internship piece, Dr. Smith and I met yesterday with Business and Industry in Iberville and West Baton Rouge Parish. And those plants are the ones that need the workers. We can't put them in an internship in those plants because they're not 18 years old. And that's not going to change. And those are the only real internship opportunities that we have in both of our parishes. This accountability plan would not go into effect until the 2026 reporting. We know today that there are flaws. Why can't we correct the flaws before we adopt the policy? If I've got a group of only 64 kids making up 8.3% of my district performance score, and we know that's a problem today, we should fix that, slow it down, and fix it. Because no one group of kids should count for a much larger percentage than they actually account for with the student population. So I'm asking that this be put on, and look, it needs to happen. But before we adopt a brand new accountability system that's going to have detriment effects, and we know the flaws in this, let's fix it and do it right. If our goal is to fix and do right what currently exists, then why can't we take another month or two, get the language right, and do it right? Simple and transparent should also be fair, logical, and equitable.
Thank you, Doc. Anyone else? Mr. Bowler, and then we'll go to this.
Clarification on slide 36 and 37. What's the difference between the two? Like the simulated scores that we were originally sent are different here?
Yeah.
Like what can you just tell me what caused that?
Yeah, well, a few things. One is the first scores that were sent out very early. We still had some work to do with our data team on the growth piece. We've resolved those issues. Those are now corrected.
So is that slide 37 the original?
Yes. Yes, okay, yes. I'm hearing yes. But also the new ones also represent the changes that kind of the board leadership agreed to that I pointed out. So they're represented in the new simulations. And then also the new simulations reflect the change in the Representative Bamberg bill. So they assume that bill is signed. If that bill is vetoed, then these simulations will change again, because then that reverts back to the old slide on the nationally recognized event.
Ms. Joseph,
I have two questions. So, the subgroup for EL, it says 15 now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So what happens when you have less than 15?
That box, it's so like where you have, say you have 112, yours becomes 111.
So it would be not counted.
Right.
Can someone explain section 1705, aggregating indicators to determine school grades? Because what I got from it is that you will receive 1 point for each percentage point per kid. So in other words, the points awarded for basic is out, and for it, and mentioned in advance. So whatever. So each indicator carries equally that, but schools will earn 0 to 100 points for each indicator, where 1 point is awarded for each percentage of students. So that means in some districts, 1% is, we're talking about number of kids, 1 kid is worth less than 1%.
Ms. Joseph, can you speak in your mic, please? I'm sorry to interrupt, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
In some districts, in schools you have where a percent, 1 kid is worth more than 1% or worth less than 1%. So how is this going to work? Number 2, schools will earn 0 to 100 points for each indicator, where 1 point is awarded for each percentage of students. How does that work?
What it's trying to say, and we'll look at the language to make sure that it says this, but it's saying that we're converting the percent to a whole number. So if the percent is 83, you multiply that by 100 and you get 83 instead of 0.83. That's what That's what it's doing.
So that means that if your kids, you have to score, it's no longer being scored master and advanced. So the percentage of kids scoring that master and advanced, so if it's 30%, you get 30 points.
That's right.
And how is that figured into everything else? Because you have everything in written form, and there's like no chart to really sit and look at, how what that equates to in anything. So with that being said, then how is it, so you put that along with the growth?
Yes, you put all of those indicators and then you just average them. So in that table, the scorecard, every one of those boxes represents one of the denominators. So if you don't have the EL population because you have 14, you don't have that box, so it becomes out of 11.
So for the pie chart that you have, for what was called status, so it's just, what you score on the test. That's the achieve portion of the thing. So what you're saying is it will be based on the kids who only score master and advanced. So if your percentage of kids, earns that, because the majority of our kids are not at the, master and advanced level. So you're saying that if you're at 25%, you get 25 points for achievement. And so and you'll redo the SPS calculator, right? And you'll put that, so it'll be that, so that's your index, 25 points. Wow.
Mr. Lambert, can you answer one thing?
Hang on,
I'm sorry.
Dr. Smith had something, go ahead.
I've got a few questions. So I've been researching the Florida model, and actually, it's really good. I concur with Dr. Barr on the simplicity and transparency of the model. I do appreciate. There's a few nuances that I wish we could possibly replicate from Florida's model. The first, on the achieve, I know mastery has been the state goal for the last, since we put in 2025s. But their percentages, I believe it's on the slide before this, the Florida percentages are much higher than ours. And I wondered why. I think it's right before this. They count level 3 scores and above. So it's a 5 achievement level test, much like ours. A level 3 is basic. Florida's definition of a level 3 is may need additional support for the next grade or course. Our definition of basic, students performing at this level have nearly met college and career readiness expectations and may need additional support to be fully prepared for the next level of studies. So I wish we could couldn't we look at counting basic and above, much like Florida does in their model. That would greatly impact our system, and I think the state, because kids that achieve basic, though they've not met mastery, that level 4 achievement level, they have still, I've seen those kids do well on the ACT, I've seen those kids meet certification requirements. They can do well in high school and beyond. The second thing, there's no ACT in the Florida model. No ACT at all. I didn't see that replicated in any one of their indicators. They also don't test science and social studies every year. Science and social studies are our lowest indicators in our model, which greatly are going to impact us because we have that grades 3 all the way through 10th grade. Florida only does it once in elementary, once in middle, and once in high. Other indicators that they had a middle school accelerator indicator. That was removed from our model. We don't have DCAI, we don't have interest in opportunities. There's nothing that a middle school has except LEAP. I think we're missing the mark on that one. Could we possibly look at the component that Florida did with a middle school accelerator of those kids that take English 1 and Algebra 1 in middle school or take high school courses? The college and career acceleration, there's a double penalty in our system that's proposed here. The ACT hits you twice. It hits you on the national accelerator. the national recognized test, and it hits you in the college and career piece because of that plus. Florida's model didn't do that. They don't have an ACT requirement, and their old strength of diploma, their accelerated for high school is very simple and very transparent. No internship is required. I like the idea of, pushing that back a couple years or at least phasing it in, but why have it at all? Why can't we just have kids earn certifications, kids earn dual enrollments, kids earn AP scores of 3 and above? Why are we complicating something that doesn't need to be complicated? And the ELTT is the last thing. Florida's model, that was not a separate bucket. I don't know why we need to have that. If we do, can we just make a subgroup bucket? That way it impacts every district and every school equitably. If you're gonna have SPED included, every school has SPED. Well, most, I should say. ELTT, you could, low socioeconomic, we could look at multiple subgroups. And then lastly, the Florida model had a phased-in approach. They don't have any districts that are lower than a C on their first, the legislature pushed that in. So they did not do a bell curve. They did, they guaranteed that anybody that was 68% or above your district got an A. Anybody that was 58 to 67% was a B. And anybody below that, 57% or less, was guaranteed to be a C. So there were no D and Fs. It was a much, just for the first implementation of it. I think we could look at that if possible. And I need to get some new simulations. If I could get new simulations based on the new updates.
Our goal is to have new simulations tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Either?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Frank, go ahead.
My team had just a question about the acceleration indicator. When it says on here for dual enrollment, a minimum of 6 Carnegie units with a grade, so are we saying 6 separate classes of dual enrollment or 6 academic hours?
No, it's 6 credits, so essentially 2 courses.
Okay, I just want to make sure, when it said Carnegie units, it says Carnegie units, so
We'll
that's,
get the wording of that.
I just was making sure, thank you.
Actually make a note of it.
Gotcha, thank you.
Ms. Joseph again.
So, I see here in Florida's, model, they have, combo, I guess that would be a mixture of high school, like a 7-12. Is there anything that accounts for, the kind of schools that we have?
We tried to look at, we actually used the Mississippi model here and just did an elementary, middle, a high in the system. If you have a K-12 school, for instance, they would just be on the high school.
So if you have a 7-12, that's still high school?
Yes, right.
So for the cohort graduation rate, how is that going to be calculated? Is it the same as it was in the previous model, or how's that going to work?
Yes, it's the same. It's on-time graduation with the diploma.
So, I mean, like the calculations for each percent, so like if you graduate 80%, 81%.
Oh, yeah, no,
no.
Good, I understand what you're saying, yeah. That's one of the most confusing things in the present formula, is if you get 75, if you're under 75, you only count at .90, and then if you're over it, you're at point this, and yeah, it's really confusing. No, this is just standard, what percent graduated. There's not a, if you don't reach a certain graduation, you deduct points, or if you get more, you increase points. It's just, did you have, if 83% of your kids graduated, then your number is 83.
Any more questions or comments?
Out of the total number of kids in the cohort from 9th grade?
Yes, ma'am.
So if I have 100 kids that started out in 9th grade, 100 of them finished, that's 100%?
Yes, ma'am.
Passing rate, or?
I have just a few things. One, I have a concern with the 18 and gold. I know that conversation's been battered around. We tell our kids they're prepared for college with an 18, they get tops. We turn around and silver is equivalent, the research is there to show that those kids are college ready with silver or whatever. So we need to look at that a little more. I think a lot of comments were made today. This isn't ready to be adopted. In my opinion, I think we just slow it down. I don't know the reasoning why we're rushed to do this. We can extend it a little bit more, still have it in place by 25, 26. We do like a lot of it, and I appreciate Bessie sitting with us, and I think this has been some of the first time that we've ever sat down and felt like we've been listened to. But there's too many changes I'm hearing in here with, well, we're going to change that, well, we're going to change the wording, and this is coming up for adopting next week. We haven't even been able to go through the changes yet. So that's my opinion, and everybody knows what that matters around here, but that, and I have a few questions on something else that does accountability that I need explained to me, but I'm going to jump to that and then we'll come back, if that's all right with you, Dr. Moore.
I mean, the item of accountability, so I don't know.
Well, it's dealing with our national rankings. I've sat and watched legislation and it's dealing with accountability. All of us have had research classes, all of us have had statistics if you've got a doctorate degree or something, and things can be manipulated. I'm sitting here listening to our legislators say we're number 40. I'm listening to we were number 47. I had this conversation with the head of the Senate. I had this conversation with the Senate Finance. And I believe you called me right after I got off the phone with him and I said, ask Dr. Browning this. I'm going to go backwards, the net. We take it randomly every other year after we take the LEAP test. And we're using that as a comparison, or the News World Report, as a comparison to the nation. We use policy, that we set a policy, and that places us at a certain ranking. We use, and I think all this is great. I want the most positive we can for our kids. I can come up with something in Jackson Parish and say, we're this great, and manipulate the data. What I don't like is listening to legislators tell us we're number 40 and we're better than that. I know what goes on in my system. And 29 kids graduate in the spring quarter at Tech, and I'm one of these systems with 35 graduates, under 2,000 kids. I don't like people telling us we're not doing our jobs, and our kids are failing. They're not. I'm on the box, this is my last time here, and I want people to hear it. And the legislators on that camera, they've all been invited to watch today. They can call me, my number's out there. I want it to be correct. If you're going to do it right, and we're going to use these numbers, let's sit there and let's take the same test. Let's take at the same time of year and compare the correct data. That's my soapbox. I'm sorry y'all had to hear that. I apologize. But I've just been passionate. Your parish is as much as mine. I'm tired of it. 32 years I've been doing this, and they play with us. Education is messed with. So votes happen, or so somebody can manipulate to do something in their life they want to do better. I love the public schools. I'm a product. And you're going to throw me into that? I was an F student, failing. And somehow I landed in a superintendent spot. Maybe by luck. But I would have cost you every zero up there. And I'm not a failure. I make a motion. We oppose this. I make a motion that we request Bessie to extend this, to give us at least 6 more months to get it worked out right. There's no reason, not one, it has to be adopted next week. That's my motion on this.
I second it.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Have a motion to adjourn?
Can I make a request
Oh,
first?
please, sir.
This is not the same, but very tied to. Is it possible that we can actually get the calculator itself? Would we like the calculator? Can we get the actual calculator?
Yeah.
Yeah. What we like to do is, whenever we get any type of new system, we want to try to be as predictable as we can. We don't want to be surprised by ending results. It allows us to establish baseline so we can get that calculated on the front end. So we can start plugging our numbers in with current data. We can actually start trying to figure out how to build out from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr.
All right, motion adjourned. Everybody have fun. Jason, second.